The twin suns of the Kepler system cast their golden light across the beautiful crystal towers of New Vela Colony. These weren't ordinary buildings made of stone or metal. The Valari people had grown their cities from living crystal that sparkled, like diamonds in the sunlight. For 300 years, this peaceful world had been home to over 1 million gentle beings who had never known war. Mining engineer Hyan Wu Kim stood at the observation deck of the orbital mining station, checking the daily asteroid reports. It was supposed to be routine work, just making sure no space rocks would interfere with their operations. But something was wrong. Computer screens showed dozens of massive asteroids heading straight for the planet below, each one the size of a small moon. This can't be right, Hyan Wu muttered, running the calculations again. The asteroids weren't natural. They'd been pushed into collision course by something with incredible power. Someone was deliberately trying to destroy New Vela Colony down on the planet's surface. The Valari people went about their daily lives completely unaware of the death approaching from space. Their crystal cities hummed with peaceful energy as families gathered for their evening meals. Children played in gardens where flowers grew in impossible colors, and elders shared stories of the old days when their people first learned to shape crystal with their minds. Elder Eltar was in the great assembly hall when the first impact. Sensors screamed their warning. Her 4 slender arms moved gracefully as she accessed the planetary defense network. But what she saw made her crystalline heart freeze with terror. The asteroids would hit in less than 20 minutes. They're small. Defense fleet couldn't possibly stop them all. All citizens must evacuate immediately, she announced, her voice carrying across the crystal communication network that connected every building on the planet. Seek shelter in the deep caves. This is not a drill, but Veltar knew the truth. The caves wouldn't save them. The asteroids were too big, too fast, too many. Her people would die unless someone from the stars came to help them. Her translucent form flickered with stress patterns as she rushed to the emergency communication center. The Galactic Council had protocols for this kind of disaster, but their nearest rescue fleet was stationed 3 weeks away by hyperspace travel. The Valari people had maybe 6 hours before their world became nothing but floating debris. With trembling hands, Valara activated the most powerful distress beacon their civilization had ever built. The message exploded outward at faster than light speed, carrying their coordinates, and a desperate plea for help to anyone who might be listening. This is Elder Veltar of the Valari people, a New Vela colony. She spoke into the transmitter. We are under attack by unknown forces. 1 million innocent lives hang in the balance. We have no weapons, no defenses. If anyone can hear this, message, please help us. We are running out of time. The signal raced across the galaxy, reaching every civilized world in known space. But space was vast, and rescue ships were few and far between. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories where few civilized beings dared to travel, Captain Lee Junho of the Terran mining vessel Resilience was having a quiet evening. His small fleet of human ships had been working the asteroid fields for months, extracting rare minerals that would eventually make their way back to Earth. It was dangerous work in the frontier regions, but humans had always been good at surviving. In places that would kill most other species, Lee was reviewing the daily reports when his communications officer suddenly sat up straight at her console. Captain, we're picking up some kind of alien transmission. It's not in any human language, but the computer is trying to translate it. The captain frowned. Out here in the Rim, they rarely encountered other species. Most aliens considered this region too dangerous for normal operations. Put it on the main screen, he ordered. The bridge filled with the desperate voice of Elder Veltar, her words now translated into Korean. As the full message played, Lee felt his blood run cold. Somewhere out there, innocent people were about to die. And his small mining fleet might be the only ones close enough to help communications. Officer Park So-young had been working the night shift when the alien message came through. She was young, barely 25, and had joined the mining fleet to see the galaxy beyond Earth's crowded cities. Now she found herself translating what might be the most important message in human history. Captain, the translation is coming. Through clearer now, she said, her voice tight with urgency. They're called the Valari people. Someone is bombarding their planet with asteroids. They need immediate evacuation help, but their own rescue ships are weeks away. Captain Lee Jun-ho walked over to the main tactical display, his coffee growing, cold in his hands. The holographic projection showed his small fleet hanging in space like tiny dots against the vast darkness. To mining vessels, the Resilience and the Perseverance, built tough for breaking apart asteroids but slow and clumsy. In a fight? 3 cargo haulers designed to carry or back to Earth, their hulls thick but their weapons non-existent. In 1 escort frigate, the Defiant, the only real warship in the group. 6 hours at maximum burn, Saw Young continued, running calculations on her computer. But Captain, we'd have to push the engines past their safety limits. The cargo haulers weren't designed for that kind of speed. Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho had been listening from his station near the back of the bridge. He was an older man, gray-haired and practical, who had spent 30 years keeping mining equipment running in the harshest conditions space could offer. So, with respect, we're not a rescue fleet. We're asteroid miners. Our ships carry rock, crushers and/or processors, not medical bays and passenger quarters. The captain studied the display, counting the ships under his command. 6 vessels total, with maybe 300 crew members between them, against an unknown enemy with enough firepower to threaten an entire planet. Smart thing would be to relay the message to proper authorities and continue with their mining operations. How many people did they say were on that planet? Lee asked quietly. Over 1 million, sir, Saul Young replied. All civilians? The message says they have no weapons, no military defenses. Lee closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of his own family back on Earth. His wife Mingji, his daughter Haewon, safe in their apartment in Seoul. What would he want someone to do if it was his family crying out for help across the void? Ships, this is Captain Lee, he announced over the fleet communication system. We're changing course for the Kepler 4142 system. Okay, emergency burn in 10 minutes. This is not a drill. The response was immediate. Lieutenant Commander Kim Do-yoon, captain of the escort frigate Defiant, appeared on the screen. She was a career military officer, sharp-eyed and cautious by training. Captain, we don't have any intelligence on what we're flying into. This could be a trap to lure rescue ships into an ambush. Da-yoon raises a good point, Chief Engineer Choi added. We don't know who's attacking these aliens or why. For all we know, this could be some kind of civil war, and we'd be taking sides in a conflict we don't understand. Captain Lee looked around the bridge at his crew. These weren't soldiers. They were miners, engineers, cargo handlers. People who had signed up to dig rocks out of asteroids, not to fly into battle against unknown enemies. He had no right to ask them to risk their lives for strangers. You're both right, he said finally. This could be a trap. We could be flying into a meat grinder. We're definitely not equipped for this kind of mission. He paused, his jaw setting with determination. But we're also the only ones who can get there in time. Those people have 6 hours before their world dies, and we're their only hope. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of the ship's engines. Everyone understood what the captain was really saying. They were probably going to die, but sometimes dying for the right reason was better than living with the wrong choice. Besides, Lee added with a grim smile, we're from Earth. We're used to impossible odds. The crew began preparing for the emergency burn that would take them toward whatever waited in the Kepler system. None of them knew they were about to become legends. The human fleet tore through the fabric of space and emerged into a nightmare. Captain Lee Jun-ho's first glimpse of the Kepler system showed him everything he needed to know about what they were facing. Massive warships hung in orbit around the beautiful blue-green world below, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems that glowed with deadly energy. Jesus Christ, whispered Navigator Han Yu-jin, staring at his scanner readings. Captain, those ships are enormous. Each one is 3 times the size of our biggest mining vessel. The enemy vessels were unlike anything in human military databases. They looked like giant metal insects, all sharp angles and predatory curves. Plasma cannons, mounted along their hulls, fired continuously at the planet's surface, turning entire cities into glowing craters. Smaller fighter craft swarmed around the capital ships like angry wasps. hunting down any civilian vessel that tried to escape. Communications Officer Park So-young was frantically trying to establish contact with the planet. "I'm getting multiple signals from the surface," she reported, her voice shaking. "Emergency broadcasts, evacuation orders, people screaming for help. It's chaos down there." Through the view screen, Lee could see the Valari civilian ships trying to flee their dying world. They were nothing like human vessels, which were built tough and functional. These alien craft looked like they had been grown rather than built. All flowing curves and translucent materials that caught the light like soap bubbles. They were absolutely beautiful and completely helpless against the attacking warships. "Sir, I'm picking up a direct transmission from the planetary surface," So-young announced. "Someone's trying to reach us." The main screen flickered to life, showing a being unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Elder Veltar appeared to be made of living crystal, her forearms moving gracefully as she spoke. Her translucent form pulsed with colors that seemed to shift with her emotions, currently showing deep blues and purples that the computer translated as fear and desperation. "Blessed ancestors," she whispered, her large eyes wide with amazement. "They actually came. You must be the Deathworlders from the third planet of Sol System. I've heard stories of your kind, but I never believed them." Captain Lee stepped forward, trying to project calm authority despite the chaos around them. "This is Captain Lee Jun-ho of the Terran Exploration Fleet. We received your distress call and came as quickly as we could. What's your current evacuation status?" The alien leader's form flickered with what looked like gratitude, but her voice carried deep sadness. "Honored Deathworlder, we are grateful beyond all measure that you answered our call, but you must flee immediately. The Krex Armada has 30 warships, and they have been bombarding our world for 2 hours. Our evacuation ships can only carry a few thousand people at a time, and we have over 1 million souls on the surface." Chief Engineer Choi Minho was running tactical analysis on his console. "Captain, the computer is identifying the attacking vessels as Krex Empire ships. They're a military conquest species from the Galactic Core. Their technology is about 200 years ahead of ours." Navigator Han Yujin pulled up the full tactical display, showing both fleets in three-dimensional space. The difference was staggering. 30 massive Krex warships formed a perfect blockade around the planet, their weapons systematically destroying everything on the surface. The human fleet looked like toys in comparison, 6 small vessels that had never been designed for combat. Captain Han Yujin said quietly, "They're right. We're looking at a full battle group against our 5 ships. Only the Defiant has any real weapons. The rest of us are just mining equipment and cargo haulers." Lieutenant Commander Kim Doggins' voice crackled over the communication system from the escort frigate. "Sir, my tactical computer is showing impossible odds. Those Krex dreadnoughts each have enough firepower to destroy our entire fleet. We need to contact Earth Command and request a proper military response." Elder Veltar's form pulsed with deeper blue as she heard the discussion. "There is no time for reinforcements. Our people are dying with each passing moment. If you cannot help us, then at least carry word of our fate to the galaxy." Captain Lee looked at the tactical display, then at his crew. Every logical calculation said they should retreat. Call for help. Let the professionals handle this. But sometimes logic wasn't enough. "Then we'll have to be creative," he said with a grim smile. "It may not be a military fleet, but we're humans. We've been beating impossible odds since we first crawled out of caves on Earth." The bridge crew exchanged glances, understanding what their captain was really saying. They were about to attempt something completely insane, and they were probably all going to die doing it. But those innocent people on the planet below were counting on them. Admiral Vorthak stood on the bridge of his massive flagship watching the scanner display with growing amusement. The Krex Empire had conquered dozens of worlds using their overwhelming military superiority, and he had never seen anything quite this foolish. 5 tiny vessels were approaching his 30-ship armada, their primitive technology barely registering on his advanced sensors. "Admiral, the alien vessels are moving into weapons range," reported his tactical officer, a young Krex warrior eager to prove himself in battle. Their largest ship is maybe 1/10 the size of our smallest destroyer. Should we vaporize them? Immediately, Forthak's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. The Kreks were a proud warrior race, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that shifted color based on their emotions. Right now, the Admiral's scales showed the deep green of predatory satisfaction. "No, don't destroy them yet," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. "I want to capture these Deathworlders alive." The Empire's scientists have been curious about the species from Sol 3 ever since our scouts reported their existence. This will be perfect research material. The weapons officer looked confused. "But Admiral, why would they attack us with such inferior numbers? It's tactical suicide." "Because they're from a death world," Forthak explained, studying the approaching human ships. "Their planet is so dangerous that it breeds insanity into its inhabitants. They probably think they can actually win this fight." Meanwhile, aboard the human mining vessel Resilience, Captain Lee Jun-ho was explaining his plan to his small fleet. Every ship captain appeared on the main communication screen, their faces grim but determined. "Listen carefully, everyone," Lee began, his voice steady despite the impossible odds they faced. "We're not warships, but we have something the Kreks don't expect. We know how to work in asteroid fields. We know how to move massive chunks of rock and metal. Today we're going to use that knowledge to save lives." Captain Yang Heiyin of the mining vessel Perseverance nodded understanding. She was a tough woman in her 40s who had spent years blasting apart asteroids in the most dangerous regions of space. "You want us to turn the asteroid field into a weapon?" "Exactly," Lee confirmed. "Chief Engineer Choi has been working on something special for the last hour. Choi, show them what you've got." Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho appeared on screen, his coveralls stained with grease and his hands holding what looked like a standard cargo container. But the humans could see the modifications he had made: mining charges wired into the container's hull, proximity sensors, and a small thruster system. "I've rigged these cargo containers with our standard asteroid braking charges," Choi explained. 2 enemy sensors, they'll look like jettisoned cargo or debris, but when something gets close enough, boom, he gestured with his hands to show. An explosion. Navigator Han Yujin was studying the tactical display, calculating trajectories and timing. "The asteroid field is dense enough to provide cover, but we'll need to lure them in. They won't chase us if they think we're just running away." "That's where it gets tricky," Lee admitted. "We need to make them think we're retreating in panic while actually leading them into our trap. Yang, your ship has the best maneuvering systems. Think you can make it look like you're desperately trying to escape?" Captain Yang's eyes lit up with understanding. "I can make the Perseverance dance through that asteroid field like a scared rabbit. They'll think we're just trying to hide among the rocks." Lieutenant Commander Kim Doggin's voice came through from the escort frigate Defiant. "Captain, this is incredibly dangerous. If we miscalculate the timing even slightly, we'll be caught in our own explosions." "I know," Lee replied grimly. "But it's the only chance we have. The Kreks are used to fighting other military ships in open space. They've probably never dealt with asteroid miners who know how to turn space rocks into weapons." As the human fleet began moving toward the asteroid field, the Kreks admiral watched with growing confidence. The primitive aliens were doing exactly what he expected, running away to hide among the rocks like frightened animals. "Follow them into the asteroid field," he ordered, "but be careful not to damage them too badly. I want prisoners, not corpses." The massive Kreks warships began their pursuit, their powerful engines easily keeping pace with the fleeing human vessels. None of them noticed the small cargo containers that the mining ship Perseverance was quietly releasing into the asteroid. Field containers that looked like nothing more than jettisoned debris to their advanced sensors. The trap was set. Now the humans just had to survive long enough to spring it. The Kreks destroyer Venom Strike glided confidently into the asteroid field, its massive hull dwarfing the space rocks around it. Captain Zektar had hunted fleeing enemies through asteroid fields dozens of times before. It was always the same: prey animals. thinking they could hide among the rocks while his superior firepower blasted them to pieces. "Primitive fools," he muttered, watching the human mining vessel Perseverance weave desperately between the asteroids ahead. They think these floating rocks will protect them from the might of the Krex Empire? But Captain Yang Hin wasn't. Running in panic, she was leading the destroyer exactly where she wanted it to go. Past the carefully placed cargo containers that Chief Engineer Choi had disguised as debris, her hands were steady on the controls as she guided her ship through the maze of floating rocks. "Target is approaching the first mine cluster," she reported calmly to the human fleet. "Range is perfect. Detonation in 3.2.1. The mining charges exploded in a brilliant flash of light that turned the asteroid field into a deadly storm of flying metal and rock. These weren't ordinary explosives, they were designed to crack apart asteroids the size of city blocks. When they detonated, they turned every piece of space rock within a kilometer into high-speed projectiles. The Krex destroyer's energy shields lit up like a Christmas tree as 1,000-ton chunks of asteroids slammed into them at incredible velocity. The ship's defensive systems had been designed to stop plasma bolts and missile attacks. It's not massive chunks of solid rock moving at orbital speeds. "Shield generators overloading," screamed the destroyer's tactical officer as his console erupted in sparks. "We're taking massive structural damage." The Venom strike shuddered as its shields collapsed and asteroid fragments tore through its hull like paper. Emergency alarms wailed throughout the ship as entire sections lost atmosphere to the vacuum of space. Back on the flagship, Admiral Vorthak stared at his tactical display in complete shock. One of his destroyers was being torn apart by flying rocks, and he couldn't understand how it was happening. "It's possible," he roared, his scales shifting to the bright red of rage and confusion. "They're using the battlefield against us. How are they turning asteroids into weapons?" His tactical officer was frantically scanning the area. "Sir, I'm detecting explosive residue throughout the asteroid field. They must have planted charges disguised as debris." Before the Admiral could respond, Lieutenant Commander Kim Da-yoon's frigate Defiant burst out of the asteroid field like a predator striking from ambush. The small human warship was fast and agile, dancing between the larger Krex vessels with moves that seemed impossible. "Hit and run, people." Da-yoon's voice crackled over the human communication channel. "Make every shot count. We can't match their firepower, so we have to be smarter." The Defiant opened fire with everything it had, but instead of targeting the Krex ship's heavily armored hulls, Da-yoon aimed for their engine systems. Human military doctrine had always emphasized mobility and precision over brute force, especially when facing superior numbers. The frigate's plasma cannons found their mark, sending one Krex cruiser spinning out of control as its main engines exploded. Without propulsion, the massive ship became a sitting duck in the asteroid field. "They're not fighting like any military force we've ever encountered," the Admiral's tactical officer reported, his voice filled with confusion. "They're using guerrilla tactics, environmental warfare, precision strikes on critical systems. This isn't how civilized species conduct space battles." Admiral Vorthak was beginning to understand why the galaxy called humans Deathworlders. The Krex Empire had built their military doctrine around overwhelming force and superior technology. They fought honorable battles between fleets in open space, where the strongest side won through superior firepower. But these humans weren't playing by those rules. They were fighting like wild animals, using every dirty trick and environmental advantage they could find. They turned asteroids into weapons, struck from ambush, and disappeared back into the chaos before the Krex could respond. "All ships, maintain formation," the Admiral ordered, trying to regain control of the situation. "Don't let them separate us. We still have overwhelming numerical superiority." But even as he spoke, another Krex destroyer was limping away from the asteroid field, its hull punctured by debris and its weapon systems offline. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were systematically dismantling his fleet using tactics that no civilized military would ever consider. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vorthak was beginning to wonder if the Krex Empire had made a terrible mistake by attacking these Deathworlders. The cargo hauler, Endurance, had never been designed for combat. Captain Ominsu knew this better than anyone as he watched the massive Krex cruiser bearing down on his position. His ship was built for one thing: hauling tons of processed ore across the galaxy at slow, steady speeds. It had thick armor to protect against asteroid impacts, but nothing that could stand up to military-grade plasma cannons. "Captain, we've got a Krex cruiser moving to intercept the evacuation ships," reported his tactical officer, a young woman named Park Ji-haen, who had joined the crew fresh out of engineering school. "They're trying to cut off the escape route." Ominsu was a quiet man in his 50s who had spent most of his life moving cargo between mining operations and Earth. He had a wife and 2 teenage sons back home in Busan, and he had planned to retire in a few years to spend more time with his family. But right now, there were innocent people dying on the planet below, and his ship was the only thing standing between them and the enemy. "All crew to emergency stations," he announced over the ship's communication system. "Seal all compartments, and prepare for combat maneuvering." The Endurance was massive, nearly a kilometer long, and filled with processed titanium, ore, that was supposed to be delivered to Earth's shipyards. Its engines were powerful enough to move that enormous weight, but they were also slow to respond. The ship handled like a floating mountain, which made it almost impossible to avoid enemy fire. The Krex cruiser opened fire with its main plasma cannons, sending bolts of superheated energy streaking across space. Ominsu tried to maneuver his ship out of the way, but the Endurance was too big and too slow. The plasma bolts slammed into the cargo hauler's hull with devastating force. "Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, Park Ji-haen reported, her voice rising with panic as emergency alarms wailed throughout the ship. "We're losing atmosphere in the port cargo bays." Ominsu could feel his ship dying around him. The Endurance shuddered as more plasma bolts found their mark, tearing through the hull, plating like it was paper. Entire compartments were venting atmosphere into space, and the ship's structural integrity was failing. "Captain, the evacuation ships are almost clear," came the voice of Communications Officer Park So-young from the flagship Resilience. "Just hold on a little longer." But Ominsu knew his ship wouldn't last another minute under the Krex assault. The enemy cruiser was closing in for the kill, its weapons charging for a final, devastating barrage. In moments, the Endurance would be nothing but floating debris. That's when he made his decision. "All hands, abandon ship immediately," he ordered. Calmly, "This is not a drill. Get to the escape pods now." Park Ji-haen looked at him with confusion. "Captain, what are you doing?" Ominsu's hands moved steadily across the control console, overriding the ship's safety systems and pushing the engines beyond their maximum rated output. "I'm doing what needs to be done. Now get to the escape pods. That's an order." Last. Transmission to the fleet was remarkably calm for a man who was about to die. "Cargo Bay 3 is venting atmosphere. All evacuation ships are clear, ramming speed." The Endurance accelerated toward the Krex cruiser like a guided missile made of metal and determination. The enemy ship tried to turn away, but it was too late. Nearly 1,000,000 tons of processed titanium ore, traveling at maximum velocity, slammed into the cruiser's flank with the force of a small asteroid. Both ships disappeared in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire asteroid field. The blast was so intense that it temporarily blinded sensors on both sides of the battle, creating a moment of eerie silence in the chaos of war. "Min-su!" Captain Lee's voice cracked with grief as he watched his friend die on the tactical display. Min-su had been with the mining fleet for 8 years, a steady presence who always did his job without complaint. He had a family waiting for him back home, and now he was gone. But even in his grief, Lee's hands remained steady on the controls. "All ships, continue the mission," he ordered, his voice heavy with emotion. "We don't leave until every Valari is safe." Down on the planets, Surface Elder Veltar watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The humans had just sacrificed one of their own ships to protect the evacuation vessels, and they were continuing to fight despite being vastly outnumbered. "They're dying for us," she whispered to her emergency council, her crystalline form pulsing. With colors that had no translation in human language, beings they've never met, and they're dying for us. The evacuation ships continued their work, carrying thousands of Valari, civilians to safety, while the human fleet held the line against impossible odds. Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho had been working without sleep for the past 4 hours. His fingers flying across multiple computer screens as he analyzed every piece of data about the Krek's warships while the battle raged around them. He had been quietly studying the enemy's energy signatures, looking for any weakness they could exploit. "Captain, I think I've found something," he announced, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Their shield. Technology is incredibly advanced, but it has a fatal flaw." Captain Lee Jun-ho looked up from the tactical display, where he had been watching the Krek's fleet slowly push them back despite their creative tactics. They had managed to destroy or disable several enemy ships, but the humans were still vastly outnumbered. "What kind of flaw?" Lee asked, hope creeping into his voice. Choi pulled up a detailed analysis on the main screen, showing the energy patterns of the Krek shields. Their defensive systems are designed specifically to counter ship-based weapons, plasma cannons, missile attacks, particle beams. It can absorb or deflect almost any artificial energy source. But, Lee prompted, sensing there was more. "They're not calibrated for natural phenomena," Choi continued, his eyes bright with excitement. "Solar radiation, electromagnetic pulses, cosmic storms, their shields were never designed to handle that kind of raw, chaotic energy." Navigator Han Yuzhen looked up from his stellar analysis station. "Chief, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? The system's star has been building magnetic pressure for days," Choi explained. "I've been monitoring the solar activity since we arrived. We're about to get hit with a massive solar flare, the kind that would fry unshielded electronics. Across the entire system." Captain Yang Hin's voice crackled over the communication channel from the mining vessel Perseverance. "But wouldn't that fry our systems too?" "Not necessarily," Choi replied, pulling up specifications for their ships. "Human vessels are built for asteroid mining and harsh radiation environments. We have natural shielding that can handle solar activity. The Krek ships are built for deep space warfare where stellar radiation isn't a factor." Lee studied the data, his tactical mind quickly grasping the implications. "So if we can lure them closer to the sun when the flare hits, their shields will be completely useless." Choi finished. "They'll be sitting ducks." Captain Yang's understanding came through clearly over the com. "We make them think we're retreating toward the sun in desperation. When the flare hits, we turn and attack while they're defenseless." "It's risky," warned Lieutenant Commander Kim Da-yoon from the frigate Defiant. "We'll be flying straight into a solar radiation storm. Even with our shielding, we could lose crew members to radiation exposure." Lee looked around the bridge at his crew. They were exhausted, scared, and facing impossible odds. But they were also human, which meant they were too stubborn to give up. "All ships began fighting withdrawal toward the inner system," he ordered. "Make it look like we're running scared. The Kreks need to think they've got us beaten." The human fleet began what appeared to be a desperate retreat, their ships limping toward the system's star while the Kreks pursued them relentlessly. Admiral Vorthak watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction as his superior numbers finally began to tell. "They flee toward their own destruction," he sneered, his scales showing the bright orange of predatory triumph. "How fitting that these Deathworlders will be cooked by their own star." The Krek's fleet pressed their advantage, closing the distance as the humans appeared to run out of options. The massive warships followed their prey deeper into the system, their commanders eager to finish off the troublesome aliens once and for all. But aboard the Resilience, Navigator Han Yujin was watching his instruments with the intensity of a man whose life depended on perfect timing. Solar telescopes showed the star's surface churning with magnetic activity, building toward a release that would flood the entire inner system with deadly radiation. "Solar flare in 60 seconds, he announced calmly. "All ships, prepare for electromagnetic pulse. Switch to emergency shielding and manual controls." The human crews began their final preparations, knowing that in less than a minute they would either turn the tide of battle or die trying. The Krek's fleet continued their pursuit, completely unaware that they were flying straight into a trap that would use the very star itself as a weapon. 30 seconds, Han Yuzhen reported, his finger hovering over the manual controls. All ships, stand by for my mark. The star's magnetic field was about to release centuries of stored energy in one devastating burst, and the humans were ready to ride that wave of destruction straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. The star's surface exploded in a brilliant burst of energy that turned the entire system into a cosmic furnace. Navigator Han Yuzhen watched his instruments spike beyond their maximum readings as the solar flare erupted across space like the wrath of an angry god. Electromagnetic radiation, powerful enough to sterilize planets, swept outward at the speed of light, turning the void between worlds into a killing field of raw energy. Brace for impact, Captain Lee shouted as the radiation wave hit the human fleet. The ships shuddered as their hulls absorbed punishment that would have instantly destroyed most civilian vessels. Emergency lights flickered throughout the bridge as backup systems kicked in to handle the massive electromagnetic pulse, but the human ships held together. Years of mining operations near unstable stars had taught human engineers to build vessels that could survive the worst that space had to offer. Their hulls were lined with radiation shielding. Their electronics were hardened against electromagnetic interference, and their crews were trained to operate in conditions that would kill most other species. The Krex fleet wasn't so lucky. Their ships had been designed for warfare in the cold depths of space, where stellar radiation was just a minor concern. When the solar flare hit them, their sophisticated electronics began failing across the board. Shield generators offline, screamed the tactical officer aboard Admiral Vorthak's flagship. Main weapons are down. Navigation systems are failing. Throughout the Krex formation, the same scene was playing out on ship after ship. Their advanced technology, so superior to human systems just moments before, was now nothing more than expensive scrap metal. The electromagnetic pulse had fried their circuits, leaving 30 of the galaxy's most powerful warships drifting helplessly in space. Now, Captain Lee commanded, his voice carrying across the human fleet communication channel. All ships, attack pattern Delta. Hit them while they're blind. The mining vessel Resilience and the frigate Defiant burst out of the radiation, storm-like predators emerging from tall grass. Their weapon systems, though primitive compared to Krex technology, were still functional thanks to their hardened electronics. The human ships tore through the disabled enemy formation with deadly precision. Captain Yang Hain's voice crackled over the cum as her mining vessel Perseverance joined the attack. Their shields are completely down, cutting through their hulls like paper. Without their defensive systems, the massive Krex warships were nothing more than floating targets. The humans concentrated their fire on engine systems and weapon batteries, systematically crippling each enemy vessel they encountered. It was like shooting fish in a barrel, except the fish had been trying to commit genocide just minutes earlier. Admiral Vorthak watched in horror as his proud fleet was torn apart by the same primitive aliens he had planned to capture and study. His flagship's main screen flickered with static as damaged systems struggled to maintain basic functions. "How is this possible?" he roared, his scale shifting to the deep black of complete despair. "We had overwhelming superiority. Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs." His surviving tactical officer, blood streaming from a head wound caused by an exploding console, looked up from his damaged instruments. "Sir, their ships are still functional. The electromagnetic pulse didn't affect them the same way it affected us." The Admiral suddenly understood. These Deathworlders hadn't just survived the solar flare, they had planned it. They had deliberately lured his fleet into a trap that used the system's own star as a weapon. It was the most audacious military maneuver he had ever witnessed. "Ships that can still maneuver, retreat immediately," he ordered. "Get to minimum safe distance for hyperspace jump." The surviving Krex vessels began limping away from the battle, their crews working frantically to restore enough power to their engines to escape. Of the 30 ships that had entered the system with such confidence, only 12 were still capable of space travel, but the human victory had come at a terrible cost. The cargo hauler Endurance was gone, destroyed earlier in the battle, along with Captain Ominsu and most of his crew. The mining vessel Determination was drifting with massive hull breaches, her crew evacuated to the other ships. The frigate, Defiant, was still fighting, but her port side was completely blown away. Captain Lee looked at his tactical display, counting the cost of their impossible victory. They had saved the Volari people, but the price had been paid in human blood and courage. 3 ships destroyed, 2 others so heavily damaged they might never fly again. All ships report status, he ordered quietly, and begin search and rescue. Operations for any survivors. The battle was over, but the real work of saving lives was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the battle that saved New Vela Colony. The Kepler system looked very different now. The beautiful crystal. Cities on the planet's surface were being rebuilt, their spires reaching toward the stars once again. Orbital construction platforms worked around the clock to repair the damage, while Volari engineering teams learned new techniques from their human rescuers. The massive ships of the Galactic Council fleet hung in space like floating cities, their hulls gleaming with the authority of civilized space. Admiral Zexstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, reading battle reports that seemed impossible to believe. The 4-armed Zentarian officer had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries, but he had never seen anything like this. 5 ships against 30, he mused to his tactical officer, watching the human survivors conduct repairs on their damaged vessels, and they won. How is that even possible? His aide, a young Zentarian named Kex Valoom, pulled up the detailed battle analysis. Sir, according to the Volari records, the humans used unconventional tactics. They turned the environment itself into a weapon, asteroid fields, solar flares, even their own cargo as explosives. Admiral Zexstar shook his head in amazement. The Galactic Council had protocols for everything, including rescue operations. When the Volari distress signal had reached them, they had followed proper procedures, assessed the threat, assembled an appropriate response fleet, and departed, according to regulations. By the time they arrived, they expected to find nothing but ruins. Instead, they found a thriving colony and a small group of humans who had somehow accomplished the impossible. Elder Veltar approached the council delegation with careful grace, her crystalline form pulsing with the harmonious colors that indicated deep gratitude. The Volari leader had aged visibly during the crisis, but her spirit seemed stronger than ever. "Honored council members," she began, her voice carrying the musical tones of her species, "we are grateful for your arrival, but the danger has passed. The Deathworlders from Sol 3 came when none others could reach us in time." Deathworlders? Admiral Zexstar asked, unfamiliar with the term. "That is what we call the humans," Veltar explained. "They come from a world so dangerous that it breeds warriors who cannot surrender. They died for strangers, fought impossible odds, and asked nothing in return. We offered them salvage rights, territorial claims, even permanent trade agreements. They refused everything." Captain Lee Junho limped across the docking bay to meet the council representatives, his arm in a sling and his face showing the exhaustion of 3 weeks of non-stop repair work. Behind him, his surviving crew members continued their tasks with quiet determination, welding hull plates and replacing damaged systems. "Captain Lee," Admiral Zexstar said formally, "I am Admiral Zexstar of the Galactic Council Navy. I have read the reports of your actions here, but I must confess I find them difficult to believe." Lee smiled tiredly. "We just did what anyone would do, Admiral. We heard people calling for help, and we were in a position to respond." "No," Zexstar replied firmly, his forearms gesturing with emphasis. "What you did was extraordinary. Small mining fleet engaging a Krex battle group and winning. That will be studied in military academies for generations." Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho looked up from his repair work, grease staining his coveralls. "We got lucky, that's all. The solar flare timing was perfect, and the Krex weren't prepared for our kind of tactics." "Luck," Admiral Zexstar laughed, the sound carrying genuine amusement. "You turned asteroids into weapons, used stellar phenomena as artillery, and sacrificed your own ships to protect civilians? That's not luck. That's courage and ingenuity of the highest order." Word of the human victory was already spreading across the galaxy through the faster-than-light communication network. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had never heard of Earth, were learning about the species that had answered a distress call not meant for them. As the human fleet prepared to continue their original mining mission, Valari began composing the first songs of the Deathworlders. These weren't just songs of gratitude, they were legends that would be sung for generations, telling of the day humanity announced its presence to the galaxy not with conquest or demands, but with a simple act of courage. The age of human expansion had begun not with a declaration of war, but with a simple message that would echo across the stars. We heard your call for help, and we came. Elder Veltar watched the human ships prepare for departure, their hulls still showing scars from the battle. They saved us all, she whispered to her council. And they don't even realize they've changed the galaxy forever. The humans were about to become legends, whether they wanted to or not.